Ahora seguimos con la agenda y pasaremos a conversar sobre la desnutrición y anemia en el Perú, bajo el enfoque de género. Este espacio presenta la problemática de la desnutrición y anemia en un contexto de crisis alimentaria, los impactos en Perú y su vínculo directo con otros fenómenos sociales como la violencia de género. Para las personas en sala, tenemos los equipos de traducción a la entrada y para los que nos siguen de forma virtual, tienen la opción de elegir la traducción en español dentro de la plataforma y la ventana del espacio en vivo. Para este espacio, le daré la palabra a Tania Silva, gerente de Sostenibilidad y Comunicación Corporativa de Transportadora de Gas del Perú. Adelante, Tania. Realmente un gusto tenerte con nosotros.
Buenos días a todos. A nombre de Transportadora de Gas del Perú, TGP, me complace poder presentar esta mañana a Onome Ako, CEO de Acción contra el Hambre Canadá, ONG que lucha contra el hambre y sus causas en todo el mundo. Onome es activista en la defensa de la salud, especialmente materna, neonatal e infantil, y los derechos sexuales y reproductivos, lo que la ha hecho merecedora del premio Voice for Children. Quiero comentar que la sesión será en inglés, pero contaremos con traducción simultánea. Hello, Onome. It's a real pleasure having you in Peru with us. I'm sure that everyone in this forum agrees that malnutrition is one of the biggest problems in Peru, but not everyone knows its impact goes further. Along our journey through 189 communities in TEP, we have discovered that malnutrition also contributes to perpetrate other challenges such as gender inequality that I would like you to help us understand. The first question to Onome. Let's start by talking about the global food crisis. How can this crisis impact the levels of malnutrition and anemia?
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's great to be having this conversation with you. And before I answer the question, I just wanted to say on behalf of Action Against Hunger, my colleagues and the communities we serve, thank you to the organizers of this conference, Perú Sostenible, for putting this extremely important topic on the agenda. So going to the issue of the global hunger crisis, one comment I really want to make is that malnutrition is a big issue. It includes everyone who doesn't get the nutrition their bodies need, including people who are overweight that are eating empty calories. So to simplify today, I'm going to use two terms, malnutrition and hunger interchangeably. So let's start with the big picture. The world has enough food for everyone, and that is a fact. And we have shown that it is possible to make meaningful progress in the fight against hunger. Since the 1990s, the global community cut hunger rates in half, and Peru actually was one of the countries that made very good progress. Before the pandemic, Peru was one of the few countries that was on track to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goal of zero hunger by 2030, which is the second goal. But in recent years, global hunger has been growing again, largely due to rising inequality, shortages, and rising food prices that are related to the pandemic, conflicts, including the war in Ukraine, and the climate crisis. I think we've all seen on the news what's going on in Pakistan currently. So around the world today, nearly 1 in 3 people do not have access to adequate nutrition. And as many as 828 million people, I'll repeat the figure again, 828 million people go to bed hungry every night. The majority of them are women and children, and the number is rising. So going back to your question on how the global food crisis actually is impacting malnutrition and anemia, more people, because of all these issues I mentioned, the rising food prices and all, more people are eating cheaper, poorer quality foods like basic cereal, and oils, and they have less diversity in their diets. We conducted, so that's Action Against Hunger actually conducted a study in Latin America and found that families are eating less meat, they're eating less vegetables, legumes, and eggs, and some people have nearly removed fish and milk from their diet entirely. And these foods are essential for protein and micronutrients, and lack of this can lead to anemia. And anemia is a condition where people don't have enough healthy red blood cells to carry oxygen throughout their body. And what anemia does to the body is that, one, it leaves people weak and tired. It can also harm immune systems, leaving people more vulnerable to infection and disease. It can also harm your cognitive functioning, making it harder to learn for those who are in school. So this can have long-term impacts, particularly on children.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Going to our local reality, why is it important for countries like Peru to address the problem of malnutrition and anemia? What are the numbers in our country? How are they facing the region? What is the impact and consequence of these numbers? Which group is the most affected?
That's a lot of questions in one, so I'll take it, one by one. So let's start with the numbers. And I think it's really important to share what the numbers is, so that we know exactly what we're grappling with. I was actually, behind and speaking to one of the colleagues from the Boston Consulting Group. And this is a study that was actually done by Boston Consulting Group that found that 45 countries, including Peru, are severely exposed to the current food crisis, along with countries like Colombia, Venezuela, Guatemala. While countries like Ecuador and Nicaragua are actually faring a little bit better. Peru's National Consumer Index, the CPI, in Lima is the highest in 25 years. And the cost of food, such as eggs, has gone up around 20%. By the way, it's not only in Peru. I came in from Toronto last night and we're finding the same increase in prices as well. So it's a global food crisis. A complication is also the fact that many people are only able to find informal employment, a majority of people. And majority of these people are spending more and more money on food. About 66% going on food. Now, before the crisis, before the COVID, people were spending about 40 to 45% on their food. Now, with 66% on food, hard choices have to be made. People are now having to make choices between eating and paying rent. They're having to make choices between food or medicine. These are hard choices. About half of the 33 million people in Peru are moderately to severely food insecure. And in Lima alone, 4 million people suffer from food insecurity, which means that they don't have enough food or the needed nutritional balance. So that's the stats. I know it's pretty, discouraging. Now you asked about what are the groups that are mostly affected. So indigenous populations, mestizo, the Afro-Peruvian communities, migrants, women of childbearing age, and of course children. Latest estimates actually show that 19% of women of childbearing age and 40% of Peruvian children between 6 months and 3 years are anemic. That's a high number. So I thought to give Tanya, just a quick example to help put this in context. And this is, information on an interview that was conducted by my colleagues here in Peru with a family, right? Helinda Piaca. And her husband is a taxi driver. And the family is having a really hard time because of the increased price in fuel. He doesn't earn enough to rent his taxi, yet alone put nutritious food on the table for his family. And his wife, Helinda, doesn't work. So this family can no longer afford to have 3 meals a day. It's been reduced to 2 meals and sometimes 1 meal a day. And that 1 meal is often a cheap meal that doesn't have a lot of nutritional value. So they could go with just squash and can't afford to buy potatoes, peas, or carrots. And if they have a little money to buy more, they give the fish or the chicken to their children, right? And their children, because of the high food prices, go to school with no snacks or with apple water for snacks. Now, replicate this around the country. And we can see that this is an urgent issue. Malnutrition is a problem that can't wait, since growing bodies and brains need good nutrition. And every child has a window of opportunity, what we call the 1,000 days, which is a critical period before a child is conceived up until when they're 2 years of age. And during the 1,000 days, a growing child is extremely sensitive to the impact of poor nutrition. So malnutrition in childhood has long-lasting and far-reaching consequences, not only for the individual child, but for the community at large. When children don't reach their full potential, we all experience as a community the greater cost of this, through greater cost in health, greater cost in education, in social welfare programs. Our communities see lower worker productivity and lost opportunities for development. And Tanya, I'll just end by saying that a malnourished child leads to a malnourished society.
Thank you, Onome. We started saying that malnutrition is related to other social problems. Based on your experience and current evidence, can you tell us how it linked to gender inequality and consequently violence against women?
Absolutely. So malnutrition is both a cause and a consequence of a wide range of social problems. The quality of a person's life is directly related to the quality of the food that they eat, or vice versa, right? The quality of their food is related to the overall quality of their life. And this is very clear when it comes to gender inequality. So again, allow me to share some stats or some data on the linkages between gender inequality and malnutrition here in Peru. So Peruvian women who work outside the home earn an average of 30% less than their male counterparts, which puts a burden on poor families and households that are headed by women. That's fact number one. 2, in Peru, 30% of women have no personal income, and so they have less input on how money is spent. And global studies, this is not just Peru, studies have shown that when women do not control, or when women are not involved in household finances, then the likelihood that their families will suffer from malnutrition is higher. Yeah? And then 1 in 3 women in Peru will suffer, in their lifetime, will suffer from physical or sexual violence from an intimate partner. And while, I want to acknowledge that there's so many people in Peru that are actually working to address this, the World Bank estimates that violence against women costs Peru 3.7% of GDP in lost productivity. So there's a strong connection between gender violence and malnutrition. So now let me look at gender-based violence and child malnutrition. Studies have shown that pregnant women who experience domestic violence are more likely to have low birth weight babies and malnourished children. And this is as a result of the stress that they go through, when they're trying to, grow a baby in their bellies and they're still going through this emotional or mental or physical trauma. Gender inequality is closely linked to food insecurity in households in many nations. So people who are treated as unequal tend to be malnourished as well. And we know that women often eat least and they eat last. So I think the one message that I want to leave, our colleagues online and here with is, the acknowledgement that women and girls and other marginalized groups are disproportionately affected by hunger and malnutrition due to their lack of control and their lack of power in most cultures, which is largely patriarchal.
What experience in the region are being carried out to reduce this relationship and consequently eradicate these problems? What examples from the business sector can you mention us?
Okay. So I'll break that question into two and first, kind of address the link between gender and nutrition. So when I think education is key, Tanya, and again, pausing to acknowledge the progress that Peru is making on education equality. Though I'll still note that Peruvian women still have lower educational attainment than men. But it's really important to take a holistic approach to reduce hunger in the short term and address the root causes over the long term. So for example, Action Against Hunger launched a new gender transformative policy last year, and we're rolling it out in all of our programs. This includes partnering with local feminist organizations to better understand the context where we work and involving women as decision makers at all levels of our projects. We all must work to engage women and girls as right holders and support political and legal policy changes that enable gender equality. Change can come when we partner with local grassroots organizations to prevent and to report violence against women, to help women and girls understand their rights, to encourage women participation in local and social organizations, and support leaders. And Tanya, I think I really wanted to share an example also even from the TGP project that we're doing with Action Against Hunger, where we developed a community strategy for nutritional surveillance for local decision making with the effective participation of a range of stakeholders, including the health sector, the community, local institutions, and other community organizations, where the role of the woman was critical for the success of the project. Now, when I go quickly to what we've been doing in Peru, Action Against Hunger has been working to improve nutrition for everyone with a focus on young women and pregnant and breastfeeding, young children rather, and pregnant and breastfeeding women. We also work to engage men and older people within communities, which helps make our programs more effective. We're increasing women's employment levels and entrepreneurship, providing loans and grants for equipment, and training in more effective farming practices and business management. And these programs can increase gender equality, grow the economy, and reduce malnutrition. Now, you also asked me to share an example of best practice from the private sector, and I think it's really key to acknowledge, the innovation that is going on in Peru in relation to fortification. In the sector, we know that fortification of staple foods with vitamins and minerals is an effective way to reduce micronutrient deficiency, including anemia. And we've seen, for decades, people fortifying salt or people fortifying wheat. So Peru took an innovative approach by first creating demand, including fortified rice for social assistance programs that serve millions of people. In less than 4 years, more than 150 rice millers applied for certification to produce fortified rice, a private sector response to a growing demand. So by 2022, over 3 million people were receiving fortified rice through social assistance programs, and in 2021, Peru passed a mandatory fortification law benefiting even more people. I think this is where you can see the private sector work with the not-for-profit and multilaterals like WFP to actually scale up nutrition programs. And it's a great story.
In the same line, Onome, what proposals can you be brought to Peru? How should the authorities and the private sector be involved?
So several things I think will make a difference. And here are 3 examples, and then I'll go very quickly to what the private sector can do. So 1 is to cut food waste. Lima throws away 60 tons of food every day, and 40% of it can be used. So that's the number 1, and I think every one of us can actually act to do that. Number 2 is to support food programs. We can provide supplementary food for children under 3 years of age and pregnant women. And it's going back to the point I raised about the first 1,000 days, which are critical in a child's life. We can help farms go organic. Half of Peru's farmers rely on imported fertilizers, and prices are rising dramatically. Again, we've seen the impact of the war in Ukraine on fertilizer prices. So to improve human and environmental health, we can advance organic food production, particularly on family farms. And this would also make Peru less dependent on food imports. Now, because this is Perú Sostenible, there are a lot of private sector partners in the room and online. I want to focus, the last few points on what the private sector can do. I think it can actually change, have effective programs through its workforce, through community programs, and through advocacy and public-private partnerships. So, in terms of the workforce, many companies already subsidize quality food in company canteens and allows some, employees to take food home. So I think that is really, an important role that private sector can play, subsidized food in canteens. Number 2 is paid maternity leave. It helps women workers and it helps reduce child malnutrition. The third point is that a growing number of companies are beginning to offer lactating rooms for breastfeeding for women. And it's key because it sends a signal about how breastfeeding is important for the child for the first 1,000 days. So companies can actually promote lactating rooms as well. Then on-site and backup childcare with feeding programs can also promote good nutrition and reduces lateness and absenteeism and greater work productivity. And some companies offer nutrition nutrition classes as a benefit for employees. But it's actually a huge value add because we know from research from Edelman Trust Barometer that many employees trust information that is coming from the employers. So if companies begin to do more nutrition programs or awareness, then you're getting people more engaged on nutritional issues. And then lastly, for companies, I would encourage programs that promote equal pay and equal opportunities, as this can have far-reaching benefits for the company and for the society. Now, moving to the second point on community, investors are beginning to take, more interest in corporate performance based on the ECG, so the environmental, the social, and the governance. And companies can stand out through their social impact efforts. The private sector can address nutrition through philanthropy or through CSR, through corporate social responsibility. And Tanya, I'll pause again to talk about very, very quickly the work that we're doing with TGP in Cusco, in Camana region. And I think thanks to the work that we're doing with TGP, we've been actually able to respond to the chronic malnutrition issue in Camana. So while we're seeing chronic malnutrition in Peru is around 11%, in rural areas it's 24%. And in Camana, where we're working together, it's about 60%, which is 5 times more than you're having in Lima. So TGP and Action Against Hunger have been working together to reduce iron deficiency anemia in children under 3. And through this project, we've strengthened the capacities of the health sector, local government, social programs, and community organizations to address anemia. And we're now reporting better family practices for the prevention and control of anemia. So this is a good example of how the private sector can be part of the solution by partnering with organizations to give the communities the tools that they need in an autonomous way to strengthen themselves and also strengthen the fight against hunger. And I really do hope, with the private sector in the room, that more can, do more in the nutrition space, because nutrition is extremely important. It's almost like the basis to which you can build other social programs like education or sports. Because if a child is not well nutritioned, right, or doesn't have nutritious foods, then they are limited in what they can partake in. Companies can use their voice for change, promoting equality and advocating for programs that promote nutrition and domestic food production. By encouraging a healthy society, companies are investing in their future workforce, they're investing in their future consumers, and they're investing in their future investors. So it's extremely important. So in conclusion, I think what I would like to kind of end with is, everyone in the room has a role to play. And I have a role to play even sitting down here with you, Tanya. So please, based on all the issues that we talked about, I think it's just a call to action that people pick there's a range of issues that we could act on, and people should actually act on them. An opportunity begins where hunger ends, and together we can end hunger in our lifetimes for everyone, for good. But we've heard me speak. Our colleagues have heard us speak, but I think it might be a good opportunity to actually hear a member of the community actually say something themselves. And we have a video, which is just for 2 minutes, that our colleagues can hopefully play for us.
Remontándonos a marzo del 2020, fecha en la que estamos cerca al inicio de las labores escolares, como todo padre en la comunidad de Absalón Alarcón, con lo poco que habían sacado en la semana, pues se dedicaron a comprar los útiles, los uniformes, todo lo que conlleva este inicio de clases.
De 15 días calendario.
El 15 de marzo del 2020, cuando nuestro presidente nos dice quédense en casa 15 días, todo cambia. ¿Por qué? Porque los vecinos gastaron hasta el último centavo en comprar el útil, pensando el día lunes yo voy a trabajar y con eso le doy de comer a mi familia. Sin embargo, ese lunes el hecho de salir a trabajar no llegó. preparados para el tema de riesgos, teníamos una mochila de emergencia con alimentos no perecibles, de lo cual se hizo uso. Pero esto siempre sabemos que es para 2 días. Ya el tercer día, el cuarto día, comienza una situación prácticamente de desesperación. Cuando de repente nuestro presidente nos dice, continuamos 15 días más. Y entonces sí comenzó una situación ya de alteración, el miedo. Ya en la comunidad no se contaba con agua. El grito de agua en toda la nueva Rinconada fue como un trueno que se escuchaba a lo largo de todos los cerros. El grito de los niños era ensordecedor. Agua, agua, agua era lo que gritaba. Nos han aislado por un momento, pero el miedo tuvo que vencerse, porque o era que mueres por el COVID o mueres de hambre. Nuestras familias tenían que ser atendidas. Paralelo a esto, cada familia comenzó a unirse. 6 ollas se formaron aquí en Absalón Alarcón. Hemos tocado puertas, principalmente a nuestro gobierno local. Ha sido un muro, porque jamás se abrieron sus puertas. Y ahí es donde nos encontramos con Acción contra el Hambre, quien nos brindó los víveres en ese momento, la capacitación para poder saber cómo poder tener al corriente este protocolo para evitar los contagios. Y no solamente decirte, oye, usa el agua, usa la lejía, usa el detergente, sino brindárnoslo para poder hacer uso de ello. Acción contra el Hambre ha llegado en el momento más oportuno aquí a la nueva Rinconada, aquí a Absalón Alarcón, la olla común que ahora está brindando la atención directa a cada uno de nuestros niños. Gracias por estar presente ahora. Pedimos que puedan seguir apoyándonos y nos ayuden a llegar a cada familia.
What a great closing. Opportunity begins where hunger ends. Thank you very much, Onome, for facing us with this reality and for encouraging us to take action to combat this issue and prevent its consequences. You have shown us that there is a lot to do to the private sector to help drive change. I urge that those present to take action against hunger, each one from his or her stance, and to you, Onome, I wish the best for you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Gracias a todos por acompañarnos, a quienes están de manera presencial y también quienes nos acompañan desde las redes sociales. Creo que ha sido una presentación muy motivadora. Todos tenemos parte en esta lucha, así que los esperamos a todos para sumarse. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Moni, for your presentation. Actually, you've opened, at least my eyes, I'm sure you've opened other people's eyes today. Gracias, Tania, por abordar temas críticos como la crisis alimentaria, los niveles de desnutrición y anemia en Perú y la violencia de género. Claramente, un súper ejemplo de cómo el sector privado puede involucrarse en erradicar estas problemáticas. Thank you again to you both.
Gracias.
Gracias.